قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him. والحديثان رواهما ابن حبان وصححهما. Those two hadiths that we mentioned last week, Ibn Hibban narrated both of them, and he authenticated them both. ففي الأول منهما إثبات عود الروح إلى الجسد في القبر والإحساس. In one of those two hadiths is confirmation of the return of the soul to the body in the grave and the restoration of feeling. وفي الثاني إثبات استمرار الروح في القبر. And in the second hadith is confirmation of the soul being remaining in the grave. وإثبات النوم, and the confirmation of sleep therein. وذلك ما لم يبلى الجسد, that will be as long as the body has not decayed. وهذا النعيم للمؤمن القوي. This bliss is for the strong believer. وهو الذي يؤدي الفرائض ويجتنب المعاصي. He's the one who fulfills the obligations and refrains from the sins. وهو الذي قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فيه. And he's the one about whom the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, الدنيا سجن المؤمن وسنته. The earthly life is the believer's prison and his famine. فإذا فارق الدنيا فارق السجن والسنة. So when he departs this life, he departs the prison and the famine. حديث صحيح أخرجه ابن حبان. This is an authentic hadith produced by Ibn Hibban. يعني المؤمن الكامل, and it refers to the perfect believer. Ash-SharH, the explanation. قوله عليه الصلاة والسلام سجن المؤمن أي بالنسبة لما يلقاه من النعيم في الآخرة. قوله عليه الصلاة والسلام, when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said about the dunya, سجن المؤمن, the believer's prison, أي بالنسبة لما يلقاه من النعيم في الآخرة الدنيا كالسجن, meaning in comparison to the bliss that the believer encounters in the afterlife, the earthly life is like a prison. وقوله وسنته أي دار جوع وبلاء, and his calling it the believer's famine means it is the abode of starvation and disasters. Yani, problems and calamities, hunger and misfortunes. This is what befalls the believer in this dunya. وفي كتاب أهوال القبور, and it is documented in the book of the horrors of the grave. Therein it is documented, وفي كتاب ابن أبي الدنيا, in the book of Ibn Abi Dunya, خرج لأبي القاسم إسحاق بن إبراهيم الختلي أنه قال, he produced from someone that he said, سمعت عبيد الله بن محمد العنسي يقول, that he said, I heard Ubaydullah ibn Muhammad al-Ansi saying, حدثه عمرو بن مسلم عن رجل حفار القبور. Amr ibn Muslim told him, so he said that Amr ibn Muslim told him from a man who was a grave digger, أنه قال, that he said, حفرت قبرين, I dug 2 graves. So this is his job. وكنت في الثالث, and I was busy digging the 3rd. فاشتد علي الحر, when it became intensely hot. فألقيت كسائي على ما حفرت واستظليت فيه. So I threw my garment over what I dug and took it for shade. فبينما أنا كذلك, so when I was like that, إذ رأيت شخصين على فرسين أشهبين. When I was like that, I saw two men come upon two gray horses. فوقفا على القبر الأول. They both stood over the first grave. فقال أحدهما لصاحبه. One of them said to the other, اكتب, write. فقال ما أكتب. The other said, what should I write? قال فرسخ في فرسخ. He said, a parsec by a parsec. He's saying, this grave shall be expanded. As if to say, for example, to just approximate for you, a mile wide, a mile long, a mile by a mile. ثم تحولا إلى الآخر. Then they turned to the other grave. فقال اكتب. And so the first one said, write. قال ما أكتب. The other said, what should I write? قال مد البصر. He said, as far as the eye can see. ثم تحولا إلى الآخر. Then they turned to the next one. الذي أنا فيه, the one I was in. قال اكتب. The first one said, write. قال ما أكتب. The other said, what should I write? قال فتر في فتر. He said, from the index finger to the thumb. Like, you know how if you spread your pointer away from your thumb, how much space is there? That's what he's saying, that much. فقعدت أنظر الجنائز. So that grave digger said, and so I sat waiting for the funerals. فجيء برجل معه نفر يسير. One man was brought with just a few people. فوقفوا على القبر الأول. So they stood over the first grave. قلت ما هذا الرجل. I said, what's the case of this man? قال إنسان قراب, يعني ثقاء. They said he was a man who he was a man who used to carry water. He was a water carrier. ذو عيال, and someone who had dependents. ولم يكن له شيء, and he didn't even have anything. He didn't leave any money behind. فجمعنا له, so we did a collection for him. فقلت ردوا الدراهم على عياله. So I said to them, give the money back to his dependents. ودفنته, and I buried him. ثم أتي بجنازة ليس معها إلا من يحملها. Then there came another funeral with no one but, this funeral didn't have any procession. Just whoever brought the dead person. فسألوا عن القبر. So they asked about the grave. فجاءوا إلى القبر الذي قال مد البصر. And then they came to the grave in which it was said, as far as the eye can see. قلت من هذا الرجل. I said, who's this man? قالوا إنسان غريب. They said, he's stranger. Mata ala mazbila. Mata ala mazbala. He died in the trash. He died in the dump. Lam yakun lahu shay. He didn't have anything. قال فلم آخذ منهم شيئا. He said, I didn't take any money from them. وصليت عليه معهم. And I prayed for him with them. Sounds like some Muslims who did a communal obligation. They found a dead Muslim, so they had to take care of him. وقعدت أنتظر الثالث. And then I sat waiting for the third. فلم أزل أنتظر. And I didn't stop waiting. إلى العشاء. Until nighttime. Which there's no problem with burying at nighttime, for your information. But better to do it in the daytime, but no problem with nighttime. So he said, I kept waiting until Isha. فَجِيءَ بِجِنَازَةِ امْرَأَةٍ. So then a woman's funeral came. لِبَعْضِ الْقُوَّاتِ. Yani a wife of one of the leaders. Maybe he's a general or something. فَسَأَلْتُهُمْ الْأُجْرَةَ. So I asked them for the salary for taking care of her grave, burying her, for the service يعني. فَضَرَبُوا رَأْسِي وَأَبَوْا أَنْ يُعْطُونِي. So they hit me in the head and refused to give me anything. وَدَفَنُوهَا فِي ذَلِكَ الْقَبْرِ. And then they buried her in that grave. انتهى. End quote. وما ذكره الحافظ أبو القاسم والشخصاني. Sorry. ما ذكره الحافظ. Okay. انتهى ما ذكره الحافظ أبو القاسم. That's the end of what Hafiz Abu al-Qasim mentioned. وَالشَّخْصَانِ مَلَكَانِ مِنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. And the two persons, or the two individuals that came to the cemetery were angels. قال المؤلف رحمه الله. Said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him. Yeah, he seems also like that grave digger is a good man. May Allah have mercy on him. So you imagine that. He dug the grave. He told him, keep the money. And they just buried them for the sake of Allah, of course. Then the next one came. They didn't even have any money. And he did the prayer with them. So he's a man who is a religious man. And the third one came. Khalas, yani, let me get some money. It's my job. And then they assaulted him. قال المؤلف رحمه الله. Said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him. ثم إذا بلي الجسد كله ولم يبق إلا عجب الذنب. Then, when the body has completely decayed and nothing remains but the tip of the spine, يكون روح المؤمن التقي في الجنة. The soul of the God-fearing believer will go to the garden. وتكون أرواح عصاة المسلمين أهل الكبائر الذين ماتوا بلا توبة بعد بلا الجسد فيما بين السماء والأرض. And the souls of the sinful Muslims, the major sinners, who died without repentance, after the body decays, shall be between the sky and the earth. وَبَعَضُهُمْ فِي السَّمَاءِ الْأُولَى. And some of them shall be in the first sky. وَتَكُونُ أَرْوَاحُ الْكُفَّارِ بَعْدَ بِلَى الْجَسَدِ فِي سِجِّينٍ. And the souls of the blasphemers after the decay of the body shall be in Sijin. وَهُوَ مَكَانٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ السُّفْلَى. And that is a place in the lowest earth. So that's the saying our Shaykh took. Some scholars said Sijin is in hell itself, or it is hell. And our Shaykh says no, it's above hell. It's on the seventh earth, which is over hell. Ash-SharH Al-Qaweem la yabla. The explanation is that this tip of the spine, this pellet, which is yani this remaining piece, it does not decay. وَلَوْ سُلِّطَ عَلَيْهِ نَارٌ شَدِيدَةٌ, even if it were subjected to intense fire. وَهُوَ عَظْمٌ صَغِيرٌ, it is a small bone. قَدَرُ حَبَّةِ خَرْدَلَةٍ, it is as big as a mustard seed. وَقَدْ وَرَدَ فِي الصَّحِيحِ مِنْهُ خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ وَعَلَيْهِ يُرَكَّبُ. It came in an authentic hadith, from this piece the human was created, and around it he shall be constructed, yani reconstructed. أي أن سائر العظام تركب على هذا العظم الصغير. The meaning is that the rest of the bones shall compile from this one, or upon this one. The rest of the bones shall compile upon this one, this small bone. I think there's 2 or 3 words that are better than some of the words that I chose, but they didn't come to me. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ لَا تَبْلَى أَجْسَادُهُمْ فَهُمُ الْأَنْبِيَاءُ وَشُهَدَاءُ الْمَعْرَكَةِ وَبَعْضُ الْأَوْلِيَاءِ. As for those whose bodies don't decay, they are the prophets, the battlefield martyrs, and some saints. قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, وَأَمَّا الشُّهَدَاءُ فَتَصْعَدُ أَرْوَاحُهُمْ فَوْرًا إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ. But concerning the martyrs, their souls ascend immediately to the garden. Tanbih, notice, يُسْتَثْنَى مِنَ السُّؤَالِ الْأَنْبِيَاءُ وَالشُّهَدَاءُ. Excluded from the interrogation of the grave are the prophets and the martyrs. أي شهداء المعركة, meaning the battlefield martyrs. وَكَذَلِكَ الطِّفْلُ, and likewise the prepubescent child. أي الذي مات دون البلوغ, meaning the one that died before puberty. Ash-SharH, the explanation. الشهداء الذين ماتوا وهم يقاتل الشهداء الذين ماتوا الشرح الشهداء الذين ماتوا وهم يقاتلون في سبيل الله. The explanation is that the martyrs who died while fighting for the sake of God, خصهم الله بمزايا عديدة, Allah gave them many specialties. منها أنهم لا تبلى أجسادهم. Amongst those specialties is that their bodies do not decay. وتصعد أرواحهم فورا إلى الجنة, and their souls ascend immediately to the garden. وقد ورد في الحديث الذي رواه مسلم وغيره. There came in the hadith narrated by Muslim and others, أرواحهم في جوف طير خضر لها قناديل معلقة بالعرش تسرح من الجنة حيث شاءت ثم تأوي إلى تلك القناديل. So he said, أرواحهم في جوف طير خضر. Their souls are within the bodies of green birds. لها قناديل. These birds have chandeliers. معلقة بالعرش. chandeliers that hang from the arsh, that are suspended from the arsh. تسرح من الجنة حيث شاءت. Those birds fly about in the garden wherever they want. ثم تأوي إلى تلك القناديل. And then they return home to those chandeliers. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. See how Allah Ta'ala, He favors whomever He wills with whatever He wills. Those birds, they live in the garden, safe, and they fly around in the garden wherever they want. That's where Allah put them. There's other birds, He created them in this dunya. They have to fight for their lives in that rough, wild world of animals. And same thing for us. We live here in this dunya. We're not there. Those birds is living nice, mashallah. والمعنى أنهم قبل يوم القيامة يخلق الله لهم أجسادا تكون بصورة طيور. The Shaykh says, what this means is that before Resurrection Day, Allah creates for them bodies in the appearance of birds. وَأَرْوَاحُهُمْ تَكُونُ فِي حَوْصَلَةِ هَذِهِ الطُّيُورِ. And their souls will be in the gullets of these birds. يَطْيُرُونَ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. And then these birds fly around in the garden. Or they, يَطْيُرُونَ. So the way Shaykh worded it, يَطْيُرُونَ. That's how the Arabic is. Here it is. Bismillah. يَطْيُرُونَ. This wow. This wow, then, so it means, if I translate it, translates as they fly. But by putting a wow there, it makes it appear that it's not the birds who are flying. The birds are the ones that are flying, of course. But had the meaning here been birds, then it would have said tatir. Tatir, not yatirun. So that wow there like that, it's like he's talking about the martyrs. So it's saying the martyrs fly in the garden. وَيَأْكُلُونَ مِنْ ثِمَارِهَا. And they eat its fruits. So the meaning is as clear. The souls of those martyrs inside of the gullets of these birds. So what I know is that these birds, they go around in the garden and they eat whatever they want to. They go wherever they want to and eat what they want to in there. And they have, they are basically hosts for these souls. And those souls benefit from whatever those birds eat. And the benefit of that reaches their bodies on earth. There's going to be still a connection between the souls and the bodies. أما يوم القيامة. Now concerning though Judgment Day, فكل واحد منهم يأخذ متبوأه الخاص. On Judgment Day though, on Resurrection Day, meaning when the people go to heaven, then those martyrs will go to their own special places, like all the people do. So now those martyrs are not in the houses, the buildings, and things like that where the people would be. Their souls are not like that. They're not enjoying in the garden in this way. On Resurrection Day, Allah Ta'ala will make those souls return to their bodies. And then that martyr will enter the garden in body and soul, and then go to his place in the garden and live in the garden as a human. لا يدخلون في حواصل الطيور التي في الجنة. After that, when their bodies and souls are reunited and they go to heaven, they don't enter into the gullets of birds that are in the garden. الأولياء والوليات بعدما يأكل التراب أجسادهم. The saints, males and females, after the soil eats their bodies, أرواحهم تصعد إلى الجنة, their souls ascend to the garden. فتسرح في الجنة بشكل طائر, and they go about in the garden in the shape of a flying creature. ليس بشكل جسده الذي كان عليه في الدنيا. It's not with the shape that his body had in the dunya. Yani his soul's not going to be in the garden with a human shape. الروح يتشكل, rather the soul shall take shape or shapeshift. بشكل طائر, into the appearance or shape of a flying creature. فيأكل من ثمار الجنة, and then it shall eat from the fruits of the garden. ثم بعد البعث تعود الأرواح إلى أجسادها, then after resurrection the souls shall return to their bodies. Yani one soul for one body. One soul for one body then debunks what? Debunks reincarnation. Reincarnation is blasphemy. And reincarnation would mean that there's more than one body for one soul. And that implies dismissing Judgment Day. Because this is not the description of Judgment Day. It's not the case on Judgment Day that a person would have 5, 6, 7, 10, 20, who knows how many bodies. All of them were his bodies in this lifetime, as a reincarnationist would say. So that's blasphemy. Rather, the souls will return to their bodies, one for one. ثُمَّ يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةِ آمِنِينَ, and then those saints shall enter the garden safely. Now, perhaps you got confused here. And you said, wait a minute, their souls take the shapes of birds. Thought you said their souls are in the gullets of birds. Which one? That one about being in the gullets of birds. That's what the Shaykh taught us about the souls of the martyrs. And this one about the souls shape-shifting into the shape of birds. That's what the Shaykh is telling us about the saints. The martyr is not a saint necessarily. Martyr could be a big sinner actually, in reality. Yani, except that because of his martyrdom, he would be forgiven. But other than his martyrdom, he could have been a big sinner. That's one of the reasons why Muslims are eager to fight for the sake of Allah. Because he knows that now maybe it's my chance to be forgiven. I've had enough fun in the dunya now. Maybe now Allah will forgive me if I die fighting for his sake. That martyr of the battlefield, he could have not been a scholar. He could have not been a pious man. Could have been a major sinner, or he could have been a commoner. What are the greatest ranks on Judgment Day? The greatest ranks on Judgment Day are those of the prophets and those of the saints and those of the scholars, practicing scholars that is, and those of the martyrs. Those are your highest ranks. And as for the rank of prophethood, that's closed off from us. So you still have 3 other ranks you can attain if you want to go for them. Perhaps Allah will enable you to die as a pious scholar who's a battlefield martyr. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. May Allah grant us that. May Allah grant me that. Ameen.
Can you repeat what you said about what happens to the souls of the saints?
Yes. So what did the Shaykh say about the souls of the saints? He said, the saints, males and females, after the soil consumes their bodies, their souls ascend to the garden and go about in the garden in the forms of a flying creature, in the form of a flying creature. Yani, bird. Ta'ir means flying creature, or means bird. And then if you want, bird means flying creature. So ta'ir could be a bat, for example. I'm just talking linguistically. A bat is a ta'ir. A bee or fly is a ta'ir. So that's what I'm saying, flying creature. This saint's soul will not be in the shape of a man, won't have a human form, a human shape. Rather, it takes the shape of a flying creature and then eats from the fruits of the garden. So that's what the Shaykh said about them. And then after resurrection, the souls will go back to their bodies. And then they come back into the garden. Yani, they will go to heaven in body and soul. Aminin, safely. وَفِي ذَلِكَ وَرَدَ الْحَدِيث. Concerning that came the hadith. إِنَّمَا نَسَمَةُ الْمُؤْمِنِ طَيْرٌ يَعْلُقُ فِي شَجَرِ الْجَنَّةِ. Merely the believer's soul is a bird perched in the trees of the garden. حتى يرجعه الله إلى جسده يوم يبعثه. Until Allah brings him back to his body on the day he resurrects him. رواه Malik. Malik narrated that. أرواحهم بعد بلا أجسامهم تكون في الجنة. Their souls, after their bodies decay, will be in the garden. تأكل من أشجار الجنة. Consuming, eating from the trees of the garden. لكن لا يتبوؤون المكان الذي هيئ لهم ليدخلوه في الآخرة. However, they will not be living in the place prepared for them when they enter the garden in the afterlife, when they go to heaven in the afterlife. إنما لهم مكان ينطلقون فيه في الجنة. Rather, they have a place where they go about in the garden. فيأكلون من أشجارها ومن ثمارها. And so they eat from its trees and its fruits. قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him. فإن قيل, if it were said, كيف يمكن سؤال عدد كثير من الأموات? How would it be possible to interrogate a big number of dead people all at once if there are only two angels who question the people in their graves? فالجواب ما قال الحليمي. The answer is what Al-Halimi said. إن الأشبه أن يكون ملائكة السؤال جماعة كثيرة. What's most likely is that the angels of interrogation are a big group. يسمى بعضهم منكرا. Some of them are called munkar. وبعضهم نكيرا. And some of them are called nakir. فيبعث إلى كل ميت اثنان منهم. So then to each dead person, two shall be sent, one from each group. And so that statement means that there's two squads of angels, or two squadrons of angels. One squad, each one of them is named Munkar. And the other squad, each one of them is named Nakir. And then, whenever someone dies, one from each group goes to that person. And that's not the same thing that some of them said about the angel of death. Some said the angel of death himself has doppelgangers. That means copies, controlled by one soul. Not that each one is independent, no. All of those copies, that means basically multiple bodies, all controlled by one soul. That's what some scholars said about the angel of death. Ash-SharH, the explanation. Okay, so they did some rearrangement here in this copy, this updated one. The explanation, أن الذي يسأل الأموات ملكان اثنان أو يكون هناك جماعة. The explanation is that who asks the dead are two angels. Yani, literally, two of them. Those two angels, their job is to go to all the dead people. Or the case is that يكون هناك جماعة. There's a whole group. كل واحد منهم يسمى منكرا. Every individual in this group is called munkar. His name is munkar. وجماعة كل واحد منهم اسمه نكير. And another group, each one of them, his name is Nakir. This is another saying. فَيَأْتِي إِلَى كُلِّ مَيْتٍ اثْنَانِ مِنْهُمْ. Then, according to this, one from each group goes to every dead person. أحدهما من هذا الفريق والآخر من ذاك الفريق ويحتمل أن يعطي الله لهؤلاء أشباحا. Now here's the saying like what I was telling you. Shaykh says, and it's possible that Allah gives those angels doppelgangers. فَيَحْضُرَانِ إِلَى كُلِّ مَيْتٍ بِشَبَحَيْنِ. So then, those two angels would go to every dead person. إِمَّا بِالشَّبَحِ الْأَصْلِ وَإِمَّا بِالشَّبَحِ الْفَرْعِي. Either in person or by a doppelganger. وكذلك عزرائيل يحتمل أنه يتطور إلى أشباح كثيرة. And likewise, Azrael, the death angel, it is possible that he develops into many doppelgangers. ويقبض هذه الأرواح الكثيرة. And then these doppelgangers will capture many souls. ولو كان في اليوم الواحد وفي الساعة الواحدة. Even if that were all on the same day at the same moment. أراد أن يقبض 100,000 نفس يستطيع. If on the same day at the same time he wanted to take 100,000 souls, he would be able to. يستطيع أن يحضر ويقبض هؤلاء الأرواح. He would be able to be present, to appear, and then take hold of those souls. ثم يتناول منه الملائكة. And then the angels will take those souls from him. إما ملائكة الرحمة وإما ملائكة العذاب. Either the angels of mercy or the angels of torture. ملائكة الرحمة منظرهم جميل. The angels of mercy have a beautiful appearance. أما ملائكة العذاب فمنظرهم مخيف. As for the angels of torture, their appearance is frightening. فلا يتركون الروح في يد عزرائيل. So these angels do not leave the soul in Azrail's hand. بعدما يقبضها طرفة عين. After he captures the soul, they don't leave it in his hand for an instant. يذهبون بها إلى السماء. They take it up into the sky immediately. إن كانت الروح مؤمنة. If it were a believing soul. وإن كانت كافرة. And if it were a disbelieving soul. فإلى الأرض السابعة إلى سجين. They take it down to the seventh earth, to Sijin. Tambihum muhim. Important notice. Ma yatawahamuhu ba'du nas. What some people imagine. من أن القبر يضيق على كل أحد في البداية. That the grave squeezes everyone at first. ثم يوسع على المؤمن. But then it will expand for the believer. غير صحيح. This is incorrect. وهو لا يليق بكرامة المؤمن عند الله. And it is not befitting of the believer's privilege with God. That if the believer were a good believer in this world and then he died, it's not befitting that Allah will squeeze him in the grave, will make his body get squeezed in the grave. أي المؤمن التقي. And we're talking here about the God-fearing believer. لأن بعض العصاة يحصل لهم ذلك برهة من الزمن. Because some of the sinners, this happens to them for some time. وأما ما يرويه بعضهم في حق سعد بن معاذ. And concerning what some people narrate concerning Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, radiyallahu anhu, may Allah accept from him, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, لو نجا أحد من ضغطة القبر لنجا سعد. Had anyone escaped the squeezing of the grave, it would have been Sa'd. So that statement there, some people, it's not clear for them, this statement. They think this means Sa'd didn't get squeezed by the grave. It doesn't say that at all. It's saying he did. It's not an authentic hadith though. فَغَيْرُ الصَّحِيحِ. It's not authentic hadith. But it is saying he got squeezed by the grave. Because saying, had anyone escaped it, it would have been Sa'd. So the implication is that not even Sa'd escaped it. فَغَيْرُ الصَّحِيحِ. This is not authentic. وَإِن صَحَّحَهُ مَنْ صَحَّحَهُ. Despite that, whoever authenticated it. It's not authentic. See, that's how Shaykh is. It goes by the evidence. Someone might say, well, if they authenticated it, then that's the evidence. Well, the Shaykh is saying, but there's evidence that it's not authentic despite their authentication. He says, Kaif, how could it be? How could it be authentic? وَقَدْ وَرَدَ فِي فَضْلِ سَعْد. When what was narrated about the merit of Sa'd is اهتز العرش لموت سعد بن معاذ. The arsh itself shook, trembled because of the death of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. Shaykh saying someone like this is not going to get squeezed in his grave. رواه البخاري. Al-Bukhari narrated that. فَمَنْ اهتز العرش لموته كيف يليق بمقامه أن يصيبه ضغطة القبر. So if there were someone that the ceiling of paradise trembled because he died, how would it then be befitting of his status that he be inflicted with the grave closing in on him? وما يروى عنه من أنه كان لا يحترز من البول فغير الصحيح. And whatever was narrated about this one, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, that he didn't used to avoid urine, this is also not authentic. بدليل ما ورد عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال. بدليل ما ورد عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أنه وصف سعدا بأنه شديد في أمر الله. This is not authentic, that he didn't use to protect himself from urine, because the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam described Sa'd with being strict in adherence to God's command. So if someone is strict in adherence to God's command, he's not going to stain himself or his clothing with urine. If you smell urine on someone supposed to be a sheikh or pious man, then that's a sign for you that he's not a pious man. There was a guy who used to claim to be, or was claimed to be, a wali. His name was Mahmoud Faris. And a lot of our brothers and sisters were infatuated with this man. They thought he was a wali, a real life saint, and they thought he was amongst the people of Kashf. That means he knows things without experiencing them. Turns out this guy was a swindler. But even before they found out he was a swindler, there was one brother. I talked to him after it was discovered this man was a swindler. But this brother told me, he said, yes, I knew Mahmoud Faris. My whole family knew him in Syria. He said, we used to go visit him and spend time with him and everything. He said, Mahmoud Faris told me to call the adhan. I didn't even know how to do it. But I used to do it because he told me to. And he said, and I would be around Mahmoud Faris and I could smell urine on him. I could smell urine reeking from him. When it reached Shaykh Abdullah that Mahmoud Faris smells like urine, he said, he's not wali. A wali would not be like that. So I'm saying all of that to substantiate what Shaykh's saying for you, to make clearer for you the Shaykh's argument. The Shaykh is saying here, this hadith that had anyone escaped the pressure of the grave, it would have been Sa'd. It's not authentic because Sa'd, his status is so high that when he died, the Arsh trembled for him. And also, concerning this great man, what was reported about him that he didn't used to avoid urine is not true. And what's proof that it's not true is that the Prophet ﷺ said that he is strict in adhering to God's command. So he's not going to stain himself with urine. Especially also when you think about what it means. Well, he didn't say anything about the smell. But if you think about what it means to have the whole smell of urine coming off you, that means you're not even changing your clothing. Subhanallah wa bihamdih. وورد عن عائشة أنها قالت في حق سعد. And it was reported that Aisha said about Sa'd, لم يكن في عشيرة بني الأشهل أفضل من سعد بن معاذ وأسيد بن حضير وعباد بن بشر. She said, the clan of Banu al-Ashhal didn't have anyone better than Sa'd ibn Mu'adh and Usayd ibn Hudayr and Abbad ibn Bishr. وكان أسيد بن حضير رضي الله عنه عندما يقرأ القرآن أحيانا تنزل الملائكة إليه من السماء. And this one, Usayd ibn Hudayr, may Allah accept from him, sometimes when he would recite the Quran, angels would come down from the sky. وأما الأحاديث التي وردت في حصول ضغطة القبر لصبي دفن في عصر الرسول. And as for the hadiths that came concerning the grave squeezing a child who was buried at the time of the messenger. وأن النبي قال لو كان يسلم منها أحد لسلم منها هذا الصبي. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, had anyone been safe from the squeezing of the grave, this child would have been. وفي حق سعد بن معاذ رضي الله عنه وفي حق بنت النبي زينب. And also what came concerning Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, may Allah accept from him, and what came concerning the Prophet's daughter Zainab. فهذه الأحاديث معارضة لما هو أقوى منها. All of these hadiths are in conflict with stronger evidence. وهي لم يخرجها الشيخان or يخرجها الشيخان. And the two sheikhs, Al-Bukhari and Muslim, neither of them produced any of these renditions. وَالْحَدِيثُ الَّذِي فِي الصَّحِيحِ. The hadith that is in the authentic books, أن ضغطة القبر للكافر والمنافق, is that the squeezing of the grave is for the disbeliever and the hypocrite. فكيف يقال إنها تصيب كل ميت إلا الأنبياء. How could it then be said that this happens to every dead person except prophets? ومما يمنع صحة ما ورد في حق سعد من ضغطة القبر. And amongst what prevents authenticity from what came concerning Sa'd and the squeezing of the grave is أنه كان شهيدا, that he was a battlefield martyr. لأنه مات من جرح أصيب به في غزوة الخندق, because he died from a wound that he sustained in the battle of the trench. والحديث الصحيح الوارد في حقه أنه اهتز عرش الرحمن لموت سعد. The authentic hadith that came concerning this man is that the Arsh of Ar-Rahman trembled because of the death of Sa'd. فكيف يصح في حقه مع هذين الأمرين أن يعذب بضغطة القبر? So how would it be valid concerning him with these two cases, with these two issues, that he would be tortured by the squeezing of the grave? وتدفع تلك الأحاديث أيضا بالآية, and also what debunks those hadiths is this 62nd verse of Surah Yunus. ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. Lo, indeed, the saints of God, they have no fear, and nor shall they grieve. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows